This video is brought to you by the dual-wheeler jokes that everyone is making at the moment, not realizing it's multiple months old at this point. With Sword Art Online Alicization episode 25, also known as War of Underworld episode 1, we return to a relatively peaceful Rulid as Alice is trying to cope with the results of 6 months ago, while Kirito is not doing anything at all. With the calm before the storm, we get to see how the world has changed during the absence of its absolute ruler and how the Integrity Knights are attempting to deal with the impending stress test. Welcome everyone, it's me Gamerturk, your most reliable source of Sword Art Online information with Sword Art Online Alicization Explained featuring War of Underworld episode 1 in the far north. As always, timestamps to individual plot points are in the description as well as the pinned comment for easy navigation, but to give you a quick rundown, despite being relatively well adapted from the light novels, nothing much happens in this first episode. That's why I wanted to have a double episode this first week, because episode 2 will be the action episode early on, but alas, if you're only watching the series for action, this was probably not your episode. War of Underworld episode 1 was all about getting you reacquainted with Alice and Kirito and the new status quo in Underworld and in Rulid, which means this explained episode will be more exposition dump oriented, which wasn't how I wanted to start things off, but hey, my opening explained has a whole lot more secrets and future spoilers, so if exposition is boring for you, there's always that. But if you're new to my explained series, what I do here is essentially provide you all the vital information on characters, events, action, lore from the source material, light novels, things that the anime did not convey properly or just did not have the time to, so you can still see the full picture. So make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon to not miss any of the details in the upcoming weeks. But then again, if you want to read the books for yourselves for the amazing experience, Amazon and Book Depository affiliate links are in the description and the knowledge of Stacia awaits you there. Volume 17 Alicization Awakening is releasing at the end of this month, so you may want to pre-order that, who knows. But without further ado, episode 1 covered chapter 15 part 1 from volume 15 Alicization Invading and the very beginning of part 2 for that cliffhanger effect, about 45 pages, however a major interlude that is chapter 14 and a couple of significant moments in the adapted chapter 15 regarding Alice's mentality were skipped, stuff about Barkuli and the Integrity Knights, how and why villagers are able to disrespect Alice who is so obviously above them, etc. There are a lot of minor detail skips as well that borderline don't affect anything, but they're not vital at all, so I'll mention them in brief sentences, whereas I'll elaborate on the rather significant scenes. There is only 2-3 of them. Chapter 14 is very likely to be included in a future episode when they start adapting the ocean turtle side, so I will spare you the bits skipped there for now. In general, from an adaptation standpoint, it was really good compared to almost all of the Human Realm arc episodes, and I'm honestly expecting this to be the standard for War of Underworld anyways, as the pacing seems to have been eased with 6 episodes available for each volume. It doesn't seem like there will be a need to cut down entire scenes, so we will only lose some depth and detail here and there at most, which can just be attributed to the fact that anime adaptations simply hate inner monologues. But that's exactly what's so nice about the light novels. With all the detail they have, they do hit like a truck. The anime begins more or less a couple of seconds after where the light novels begin this chapter, semi-reintroductory to the arc and characters. Alice describes Kirito's looks, specifically how much weight he has lost over time. Keep in mind, having your mind blank doesn't just mean you're useless, it also means your body is pretty much destroying all your body mass with all the inactivity and barely eating anything and stuff. So the light novels do make a big point of this as well, how thin and bony Kirito looks, just to add to those blank eyes. Also, I know many of you who are confused how the Blackrock sword was fixed. Well, Reki addressed this very early on as well with the heartbreaking reminder. When Kirito asks for the swords, Alice grabs them one by one. First grabbing the Night Sky sword, she mentions that it's almost as heavy as her Osmanthus blade, which is a nod that it's very likely that the Osmanthus blade is actually a higher object control authority than the black one. And then when she grabs the Blue Rose sword, she does highlight it's about half as heavy as the other 2 weapons, the painful reminder of the Battle of the Central Cathedral that the sword is still in half. Also keep in mind that in War of Underworld a lot of technical aspects are omitted, mostly because the characters are at a point where they are not affected by their limits. You won't get to hear control authorities all that often and the like, and that also has to do with the fact that we will experience a lot of events from the perspective of various Underworldians who are not really aware of the existence of those technicalities, the stats anyways. Alice, thinking about how she built the house with the help of old man Garita, was skipped in the anime, you know. Alice going to the lake with Selka, whereas in the novels, Selka arrives when Alice is returning from the lake hoping to find her. The flashback, however, loses a lot of context due to it being a narration by Alice in the light novels, and the anime completely skips these narrations. But first off, let me commend them for their attention to detail. I'm not sure if I mentioned them in one of my trailer explained videos, but if you look back into episode 24, they did actually sneak this very same visual with Alice for about 2 to 3 frames if you go frame by frame, something not many people have realized, so props to the anime team for that. But on the other side, while we didn't even directly experience the scene in the novels like in the anime, we actually did get a whole lot more information than what the anime has provided back in the light novels, among some slight changes. After Alice had spent a couple of minutes when she woke up in an attempt to wake Kirito up, that was her first revelation that she refused to admit for 6 months and even longer. She shouted to Kirito to take responsibility for his actions, indirectly begging him to show her the way, but getting absolutely no response from him, told her pretty much what she needed to know. It was almost like Kirito was telling her that she had to continue on this path of self-discovery on her own without his help. The biggest fear of Alice that would haunt her for more than half a year. In the novels, she eventually gave up for the time being from waking Kirito up and headed back down to check on Berkuli instead of Berkuli arriving at the top floor. She saw Berkuli was not awake, however Chudelkin's deep freeze had gone out, so he simply was floating in the now melted bathwater. Alice simply told Berkuli about everything, how Integrity Knights were created, the sword golem and the memories, the death of the administrator. She did not hold anything back from him. However, Berkuli realized he needed to be more cautious with all of this information, and that's why he provided a much more censored version of Alice's breakdown to the other Integrity Knights. He told them about Quinella's demise, but never mentioned them that Integrity Knights were brainwashed humans. He told them about the sword golem, but never mentioned their loved ones were the humans that were used to create the golem. Berkuli shared bits and pieces of this information very carefully, and it was pretty obvious to him that despite Quinella's demise, the piety modules of the Integrity Knights were still functioning and ensured their obedience to the Axiom Church, and thus, as the next in line in command, they were willing to follow Berkuli's leadership. But this had come with a major side effect. Not knowing the entire real story and motive behind the events that transpired, the Integrity Knights and the Axiom Church in general saw Kirito as an enemy of the Church, the one who killed the Pontifex and the Prime Senator. In their eyes, Kirito had to be punished accordingly, and that was particularly clear in Eldri's words. Alice did help a bit with the initial rebuilding efforts of the Integrity Knights and the Axiom Church, but knowing the possibilities, she simply took Kirito before anyone could harm him and went off to rule it. Putting a small bracket here since many of you are confused as to how certain Integrity Knights are still functioning, starting with Berkuli. Not a clear explanation is given, but certain sacred arts have to be maintained over time by its caster, while some of them are simply one-off spells. It's very likely that Deep Freeze is one of those maintained spells, considering some future events or rather backstories of the new Integrity Knights that will arrive in a couple of episodes, so once Chudelkin was gone, the spell simply wore off after a time. Fanatio was simply healed by Cardinal and left sleeping in the Axiom Church garden before Cardinal made her appearance in Quinella's chambers. She simply has no recollection of how she was healed or how she appeared back in the garden. I don't think there are any questions about how the other knights survived since their experiences were very self-explanatory, but do let me know in the comments if you need something clarified. After this, it's pretty damn faithful for these scenes. I'm even surprised that they went ahead and even adapted Zing's moment here. However, you may be missing a key detail in why Alice's father banished her from the town. You see, Alice has never told anyone that she's an Integrity Knight now, with a higher authority than the Taboo Index. For all intents and purposes, Alice is a criminal here, and Gospel Tsuberg, no matter how much he regrets, much like the day Alice was taken away years ago, is forced to not allow Alice into the town via the still active Taboo Index. If she were to tell them that she was now an Integrity Knight, she would be above the Taboo Index and would have no issues staying in Rulit at that point. But Alice's initial introduction was also there to highlight why she was uncomfortable towards the idea of acting as a proper sister to Selka, despite Selka herself having no problems with her at all. She purposefully introduces herself only as Alice instead of Alice Zuberg. The payoff for her inconfidence was supposed to be at the end of this episode as well as the next one, and I'll mention the former in this explained of course once we get there at the end. Next up we got the Landlord Barbossa scenes. Again, the scenes here are perfectly accurate as well, almost perfectly accurate as well, with lots of detail of course. This was actually an extensive scene that explored the way perceived authority works in Underworld. In Underworld, you cannot really be disrespectful towards your perceived superiors in hierarchy in normal cases. It's not like forbidden by the taboo index or any other law, but among lower tier rules, thus it's not impossible to do so in a rash situation, as some of those lower tier rules don't prohibit the act but rather give the subject the right to punish the person who crossed the line, which is why Ronnie and Tize did not get the seal of the right eye back in episode 10 and on. But what I'm trying to get to here is that in normal cases Barbossa wouldn't even be able to ask Alice to work for her for a second time in a month. After a month she had arrived in Rulit, the villagers came to her for help, so in order to stop that from becoming a regular thing, she came to a binding agreement with Barbossa and his rival Ridak. In a situation where both parties saw each other as equals, such a binding agreement would simply stop Barbossa and Ridak of course from even attempting to negotiate for additional work. However, Alice was officially a criminal and she had never told them that she was an Integrity Knight, thus the villagers Barbossa and Ridak did not know that she was way above them in terms of authority, but even more so, what they perceived was that Alice was simply a lower being than they were, hence why they could openly disrespect her, or in Barbossa's case, completely disregard their binding agreement without causing an issue to himself. When cutting the tree, Alice also makes a big deal out of her moves being quote-unquote rusty, and you will hear her repeat that sentiment when speaking with Eldri, and that won't be the last time you hear the sentiment either. The final scene I feel like that absolutely had to have been mentioned is from the final scene after Eldri leaves. While they shortened the time between Eldri's visit and the Rulit fire scenes by making it the exact same night rather than the next night, that's not an issue of concern really. It's that they cut out a major scene with Alice. After Eldri located her, Alice was certain it wouldn't be too long until Berkuli would arrive to ask her to return, and Alice simply knew she wouldn't be able to say no to him. When he left, she started thinking on what to do and where to go. She remembered the conversation between Kirito and the strange voice of a man from the device. He had used terminology in English, which is the sacred tongue used for sacred arts in Underworld. She also thought about other possibilities as to where to go, but never managed to come to a decision herself, completely lost and shattered. Seeing the pitiful state of Kirito, she even considered to take her own life right then and there along with Kirito's. One last time, she asked, "Tell me, Kirito, what should I do?" Tears falling down her cheeks. The following day after Eldri's visit, she started packing up to leave. She spent the entire day writing on 2 pieces of parchment, one letter for the old man Garita, who did not withhold his help or knowledge from Alice since she returned, and one letter for the one person from inside Rulit that always welcomed her with open arms, the sister she was not able to register as a real sister since she arrived due to her regret of indirectly causing the real Alice Zuberg to never reunite with her sister, Selka Zuberg. As a final gesture towards Selka, to be able to at least say goodbye as her actual sister, she signed off the letter as Alice Zuberg, the surname she never got herself to use, following up with the synthesis 30 in sacred script. She didn't want her sadness to reflect to Kirito when she turned to him and cheerfully asked where he would want to go, knowing full well she would not get a response, which only caused her to feel a bigger pain inside. She simply had no direction herself, reflecting her life, having no idea of her purpose in life, just like 6 months ago when she begged Kirito to wake up and tell her what to do. Taking him to bed earlier than usual to wake up early next morning to vanish from Rulit together. She was simply planning on jumping on Amayori with Kirito early in the morning and let Amayori pick a direction and just keep going. But in the middle of the night, she woke up to Kirito shaking like a phone on silent. Alice actually did get suddenly excited, thinking he may finally be waken up after all, but was let down when she looked at his vacant eyes like they were for the past 6 months. She wasn't sure what was happening to the boy at first, but she had realized he was trying to get out of the bed. And then she heard Amayori and ran out, only to see lights of huge flames hitting the clouds above. That was the moment she realized she had to fight to protect the world Yuji and Kirito had saved. But that is obviously the end of the episode. It's not the end of the scene though, so I do hope they follow up exactly where we left off with episode 2 instead of just skipping to Alice flying on Amayori as we've seen in the trailers. The thing that follows this is a minor detail with a major emotional punch in regards to Kirito. It's something that really won't take them any additional animation workload or any valuable screen time for more than 15 seconds, so I really do hope they include the rest of that scene. But before I ask you to like and subscribe and type the Golden Knight of the Human Empire in the comments to let me know you're this far in, let me do something that some of you probably won't enjoy. I don't like the animation quality of this episode at all. I've seen many people praising the animation, but as someone who watched the episode multiple times so far, I'm convinced most animation is just still frames due to lack of any action. Heck, they couldn't even bother animating small movements like the characters have, so they showed stuff from other points of view just so they wouldn't have to animate anything and keep it as a still shot. They cut so many corners with moving visuals that we got constant melting face syndrome that we suffered since episode 15, as well as extremely low quality drawings that are the main focuses of the scene, mind you, like the Blue Rose Sword's handle in this mid-zoom shot or when Eldri's landing right here. Yeah, we had this stuff back in episode 16 plus as well, but the difference is, they were approaching the end of a huge marathon at that point. It was absolutely natural to have animation issues in such a rush period. That was perfectly empathizable, I don't know which word is the correct one, so I'll use both. Here, this is the very first episode of War of Underworld after an entire break of 6 months. That's 2 entire cores. Episode 1 had absolutely no excuse here to be cutting this many corners, and I have to point out that along with some other rumors and reports I've been receiving from various sources, this kinda genuinely worries me. Sure, they are going to have another 1 core break after episode 12, so they're not really all that much in a rush like back in the first part, but this is the very first episode, the episode that they had 6 months to properly adapt, to properly prepare, to properly polish. Considering visuals only degrade in the long run unless they pull off some miracle, this is not promising at all. Such a static episode with such static animations accompanied by so much corner cutting on drawings, I fear what we may get come episode 8+, where there will be giant spectacles taking place without the animation quality to actually back that up. For now, I will keep hoping that they simply are allocating more time to those episodes, and that's why episode 1 is so bland and low quality in the animation department. However, since episode 15, I have this suspicion that A1 has way too many background artists that draw gorgeous landscapes and backgrounds, but are significantly short-staffed in regards to people who actually animate things from keyframes. So we got absolutely perfect scenery wherever we go, but the moment something on the screen has to move, as in, change its shape rather than some pan or zoom effect, things start falling apart, faces look like they're melting, details are dropped to negatives, etc. And if that suspicion by any chance at all ends up being true, then I got some terrible news for the climactic moments, so let's pray together that that won't become true. But yeah, next episode is titled The Raid, so while half of the episode is gonna take place in Rulit village, the other half will be returning to the Ocean Turtle. If you made it this far into the video though, comment the Golden Knight of the Human Empire down below to let me know. This week my schedule was totally messed up, so I had to merge the first Alicization Q&A with the second one, scheduled for next week. I don't know what I will do with Fate Grand Opinions right now, but that certainly will get back on track before too late. I have some surprises planned as well. I just hope I can find enough time to realize all of that within the next week. But remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more on Sword Art Online. If you have questions, ask them in the comments and I'll answer in my weekly Q&A. Like if you enjoyed, check out my channel merch, there'll be more stuff there as the anime progresses. Huge thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members as always, and until next time, stay cool.